The world tilted, then shattered. One moment, I was standing, a life built on what I believed was solid ground, and the next, my legs gave out from under me. I remember the cold, hard asphalt rushing up, the metallic taste of fear and betrayal in my mouth. My vision blurred, not from tears, but from the sheer, unimaginable force of what I had just discovered. It wasn't a physical blow, yet it felt like every bone in my body had been crushed. The air left my lungs in a ragged gasp, and I crumpled, a heap of disbelief and agony. My wife, Sarah, my Sarah, the woman I loved more than life itself, the woman I had built a home with, shared my dreams with, woke up beside every single morning for a decade. She had a secret, a monumental, life-altering secret that she had kept hidden from me for 10 long years. 10 years of monthly hospital visits, always shrouded in vague explanations, always dismissed with a gentle, trusting nod from me. And now, in a single, devastating moment, the truth had crashed down, obliterating everything I thought I knew. It had become such a routine, almost a ritual. Once a month, like clockwork, Sarah would grow quiet. The cheerful sparkle in her eyes would dim slightly, replaced by a distant, almost melancholic gaze. "I have appointments today, David," she'd say, her voice softer than usual. "Just some things I need to take care of." And I, foolish, trusting David, would simply nod. "Okay, honey. Do you need anything? Will you be back for dinner?" She'd offer a small, tired smile. "I'll be fine. Don't worry." And then she'd be gone for the day, leaving me to my work, to our quiet, comfortable home, completely oblivious to the elaborate deception unfolding around me. I never pressed, never pushed for details. Why would I? I trusted her implicitly. Our marriage was a sanctuary of honesty and mutual respect, or so I believed. If Sarah said she had an appointment, she had an appointment. If she said she was fine, she was fine. I thought it was just her way of handling personal medical matters, a private aspect of her life she preferred to keep to herself. Maybe it was a women's health issue she wasn't comfortable discussing, or a chronic condition she didn't want to burden me with. My mind conjured up a dozen plausible, innocent scenarios, each one a testament to my unwavering faith in her. How wrong I was. How utterly, tragically wrong. The discovery wasn't a sudden, dramatic explosion. It was a slow, insidious unraveling, like a thread pulled from a perfectly woven tapestry, revealing the gaping holes beneath. Tiny, seemingly insignificant anomalies that, over time, began to coalesce into a terrifying pattern. A misplaced medical bill from a hospital I didn't recognize. A fleeting, guarded look in her eyes when I casually mentioned our finances. A sudden, almost aggressive defensiveness when I innocently asked about her day after one of her appointments. Each incident, by itself, was easily dismissed, rationalized away by my love and trust. But cumulatively, they formed a suffocating weight, a growing suspicion that I fought desperately to ignore. And then, the final, undeniable piece of the puzzle clicked into place, and the entire structure of my understanding of our life together imploded. It was a revelation so profound, so utterly devastating, that it stole my breath and brought me to my knees. The woman I had vowed to spend my life with, the woman who shared my bed and my heart, had been living a parallel existence, a secret life I knew nothing about. How could she? The question echoed in the hollow cavern of my chest, a desperate, silent scream. How could Sarah, my kind, gentle, loving Sarah, have kept such an enormous secret from me for so long, for 10 years? A decade, a significant portion of our shared life, tainted by this unspoken truth. The betrayal wasn't just in the act of keeping the secret, but in the erosion of every tender moment, every shared laugh, every intimate confession we had exchanged. Did any of it mean anything? Was our entire relationship built on a foundation of lies? The weight of the secret, now unleashed and raw, felt like a physical burden pressing down on me. It was a crushing, suffocating sensation, as if an invisible hand was squeezing the very life out of me. My mind raced, trying to grasp the implications, to make sense of the senseless. My heart ached with a pain far deeper than any physical injury. It wasn't just anger, though that was certainly there, a searing, white-hot flame licking at the edges of my sanity. It was a profound sense of confusion, a disorienting loss of reality. The woman I thought I knew, the life I thought I had vanished in an instant, replaced by a terrifying, unknown landscape. I loved Sarah with every fiber of my being. I trusted her completely, implicitly, without question. Our bond felt unbreakable, forged in shared experiences, mutual respect, and an honesty I believed was absolute. That's why this discovery was so utterly devastating. It wasn't just a secret. It was a fundamental betrayal of that trust, a shattering of the very core of our relationship. How could she have done this to us, to me, to everything we had built together? I'm still reeling, still struggling to process the enormity of it all, but I need to tell this story. I need to explain how I, David, a man who thought he had a perfect marriage, came to be lying on the asphalt, gasping for air, his world in ruins. I need to go back, to the very beginning, to reconstruct the timeline of deception, to understand how I could have been so blind for so long. Because this isn't just about a secret. It's about the hidden sacrifices, the unspoken burdens, and the profound, often painful, complexities of love and trust. And it all started with a quiet woman, a coffee shop in Portland, and a series of monthly appointments that would eventually unravel my entire life. It all started in a bustling coffee shop in Portland, Oregon. That's where I first laid eyes on Sarah. She was perched on a stool by the window, sketching intently in a small notebook, a half-empty latte steaming beside her. The way the morning light caught her auburn hair, the focused intensity in her eyes, the gentle curve of her smile when she finally looked up and met my gaze. It was captivating. I remember fumbling with my order, completely flustered but somehow managing to ask if the seat beside her was taken. It wasn't. We talked for hours that day, oblivious to the world outside the coffee shop's cozy confines. I learned she was a graphic designer, loved hiking in Forest Park, and had a surprisingly dry wit hidden beneath her quiet demeanor. I was instantly drawn to her kindness, her genuine warmth, and, subtle, intriguing air of mystery that made me want to know everything about her. Our early dates were simple, unpretentious, and perfectly us. We'd explore the winding trails of Forest Park, cook elaborate meals together in my tiny apartment, or spend evenings curled up on the sofa, watching old movies and sharing stories from our lives. Everything felt easy, natural, and profoundly right. About 6 months into our blissful relationship, the first flicker of what would become a decade-long pattern emerged. We were planning a weekend getaway to the coast when Sarah mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that she had an appointment she couldn't reschedule. Her tone was casual, but I noticed a slight tension in her shoulders, a fleeting shadow in her eyes. When I asked about it, she simply waved it off with a gentle smile. "Oh, it's nothing really. Just a checkup for a minor, old issue." Nothing to worry about. She offered no further details, and I, eager to please and trusting by nature, didn't press. I valued her privacy, and if she didn't want to elaborate, I respected that. It seemed like a small, insignificant detail in the grand scheme of our blossoming love. 2 years later, we stood on a bluff overlooking the Pacific, exchanging vows as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues. We were married, and life felt like a dream come true. We bought a charming little house in the suburbs, nestled among quiet streets and leafy trees, just outside Beaverton. I continued my work as a software engineer, while Sarah, with her keen eye for design, thrived as a freelance graphic designer. Our life together was everything I had ever hoped for. Comfortable, loving, filled with shared laughter and quiet companionship. But the monthly visits, those vague appointments, became an increasingly regular fixture in our lives. Always around the same time of the month, a subtle shift in Sarah's mood would precede them. She'd become a little more withdrawn, a touch more pensive. Then, on the designated day, she would leave early, returning late in the afternoon or early evening, looking visibly tired, sometimes even a little pale. When I'd ask how her day was, she'd offer the same stock response: "Fine, just a long day." And I, still trusting, still blissfully ignorant, would accept it without question. I often reflect now, with the bitter clarity of hindsight, on why I never dug deeper, why I never truly challenged her evasiveness. The truth is, I believed in giving space. I believed that if something was truly serious, truly life-altering, Sarah would tell me. We shared everything else: our dreams, our fears, our daily triumphs and frustrations. This one recurring vague appointment seemed like an anomaly, a personal medical matter that she simply preferred to keep private. I convinced myself it was something like a chronic, but manageable, condition she didn't want to burden me with. Or perhaps a recurring women's health issue she found too intimate to discuss. My love for her was so profound, my trust so absolute, that I constructed an elaborate mental framework to accommodate this one recurring mystery, fitting it into the otherwise perfect mosaic of our shared life. Our relationship, in every other aspect, felt incredibly solid. We talked for hours about our future, about starting a family, about renovating our home. We navigated daily challenges with open communication and mutual support. Sarah was my rock, my confidant, my best friend. The idea that she would deliberately deceive me or keep a significant part of her life hidden was simply unthinkable. It went against everything I thought I knew about her and about us. So I let it be. I believe that this small, odd detail was just that, a small, odd detail in an otherwise perfect picture of marital bliss. I truly thought we had a perfect, honest marriage, and that this monthly ritual was merely a quirk, a private corner of her life that didn't diminish the vast open landscape of our shared existence. I couldn't have been more wrong. For years, the monthly hospital visit seamlessly integrated itself into the fabric of our lives, becoming as predictable as the rising and setting of the sun. It was just a thing Sarah did, a regular occurrence, like her morning coffee or her evening walk. I would subtly adjust my schedule, ensuring she had the day free, perhaps even picking up her favorite takeout for dinner, a small gesture of support for what I perceived as her private, necessary chore. It was a well-oiled machine, running quietly, in the background of our otherwise vibrant and open relationship. But over time, subtle changes began to manifest, tiny ripples in the calm surface of our domesticity that, at the time, I attributed to stress, fatigue, or simply the passage of time. Sarah, usually so effervescent, would sometimes seem a little sadder after these monthly excursions. Not overtly, not dramatically, but a quiet melancholy would settle around her, like a fine dust for a day or two. She'd be more reflective, her gaze often drifting into the distance as if lost in thought. Occasionally, I'd notice new, small scars or faint marks on her arm, which she'd quickly brush off as clumsiness or just a scratch from gardening. My mind, ever eager to maintain the peaceful illusion of our life, readily accepted these explanations. After all, who among us isn't a little clumsy sometimes? I became a master of internal justification, constructing elaborate narratives in my head to explain away every incongruity. Maybe it's a chronic condition she doesn't want to burden me with, I'd tell myself, conjuring images of invisible ailments that required discreet, ongoing medical attention. Perhaps it's something genetic she's monitoring, a family predisposition she's tracking silently. My imagination, fueled by love and an unwavering desire to trust, worked overtime to rationalize her secrecy. I convinced myself that it was nothing bad, nothing sinister, just her private medical stuff, a corner of her life that was hers alone, and I, as a loving and respectful husband, should honor that privacy. It was a testament to my profound affection for her, or perhaps to my profound naivete. Our friends and family, those who populated the periphery of our lives, never noticed anything amiss. Sarah was a master at maintaining appearances, a skilled performer on the stage of everyday life. When asked about her health, she would always offer a reassuring smile and a breezy, "Oh, I'm perfectly fine, thank you." Her demeanor was so convincing, her composure so unwavering, that no one ever questioned it. She presented a united front, a picture of perfect health and happiness, and I, her unwitting accomplice, contributed to the illusion simply by believing it. However, there was one area where my internal justifications began to fray, a subtle but persistent worry that gnawed at the edges of my peace of mind: our finances. I handled the bulk of our joint investments and larger financial planning, but Sarah managed the day-to-day household budget. I started to notice that our savings weren't growing as fast as they should have been, given our comfortable salaries and relatively modest lifestyle. The figures just didn't quite add up. When I'd bring it up gently, she would attribute it to general living costs, unexpected repairs, or just the price of things these days. I accepted her explanations, albeit with a lingering sense of unease. After all, inflation was a thing, and life did have its unexpected expenses. I trusted her implicitly, even with our money. In every other conceivable way, Sarah was the perfect wife. She was loving, supportive, and possessed a quick, infectious humor that could brighten even my darkest days. She was the anchor of our home, the warmth in our bed, the quiet strength that balanced my sometimes anxious nature. She remembered every anniversary, celebrated every small victory, and offered unwavering comfort in times of sorrow. She was my partner, my confidant, my best friend. This made it even harder to suspect anything was truly wrong. The idea of her harboring a deep, dark secret seemed utterly incongruous with the incredible woman I shared my life with. And so, the years melted into a decade, 10 years. 10 years of monthly hospital trips, 10 years of vague explanations, 10 years of my blind, unwavering trust, 10 years of me living happily, completely oblivious, convinced that I knew my wife inside and out. I genuinely believed we had a perfect, honest marriage built on a foundation of absolute transparency and mutual respect. I saw no cracks, no fissures, only the smooth, unblemished surface of our shared life. I was a man living in a beautiful, meticulously constructed illusion, completely unaware that the foundations were slowly, silently, crumbling beneath my feet, and soon that illusion would shatter, leaving me to face a reality far more complex and heartbreaking than I could ever have imagined. The first crack in that meticulously constructed illusion appeared subtly, almost imperceptibly, one quiet evening after Sarah had gone to bed. I was tidying up the kitchen, sifting through a pile of junk mail that had accumulated on the counter, a mundane chore I usually avoided. Tucked beneath a stack of flyers and expired coupons, I found an envelope. It was addressed to Sarah, from a hospital I didn't recognize, located in a town about an hour away from us, Salem, Oregon. My heart gave an involuntary lurch, a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor of unease. My initial reaction, fueled by a decade of ingrained trust and rationalization, was to dismiss it. Maybe a referral, I mused, holding the unfamiliar bill. A specialist clinic she had to visit once? After all, Portland was a big city, but perhaps for certain rare conditions one had to travel. I tried to convince myself that it was a one-off, an anomaly. But the seed of doubt, once planted, began to germinate, tiny and insidious, in the fertile ground of my subconscious. It wasn't the Portland hospital she always vaguely referenced. It was Salem. And why had she never mentioned it? A few weeks later, another tiny, unsettling piece of the puzzle presented itself. It was a subtle shift in Sarah's behavior, one that, in hindsight, spoke volumes. She became noticeably more secretive with her phone. Where once it lay openly on the table, now it was often face down or tucked away in her pocket. She'd take calls in another room, her voice hushed, or quickly close apps on her screen if I happened to walk by. This was new. Our phones had always been open books to each other, a testament to our transparent relationship. This sudden guardedness felt like a tiny, dissonant note in the symphony of our otherwise harmonious life. The growing unease prompted me to look more closely at our bank accounts, something I hadn't done with such scrutiny in years, trusting as I was in Sarah's management of the household budget. And that's when I saw it. Regular, significant withdrawals. Not huge sums that would scream extravagance, but consistent amounts, always around the time of Sarah's appointments. They weren't accounted for in our usual expenses, our mortgage, utilities, groceries, or even the occasional splurge. These were simply unexplained outflows, a steady drip that, over time, added up to a substantial drain on our savings. The financial strain I had vaguely noticed earlier suddenly had a face, a pattern. My suspicion, once a tiny seed, began to blossom into a thorny, uncomfortable bush within me. I tried to talk to Sarah about it, casually at first, attempting to broach the subject of the finances or the mysterious medical bill without directly accusing her. "Hey, I noticed a bill from Salem Hospital," I might say, trying to sound nonchalant. "Everything okay with that?" Or, "Our savings seem a bit low this month. Anything big come up I should know about?" Her reaction was immediate and defensive, a stark departure from her usual calm demeanor. Her eyes would narrow slightly. Her jaw would tighten. "You don't trust me?" she'd ask, her voice laced with an unfamiliar edge, almost accusing. The question hung in the air like a heavy curtain, stifling any further inquiry. She would quickly change the subject or dismiss my concerns with a wave of her hand, saying I was making a big deal out of nothing, and that her health, and by extension, her finances, were private. This defensiveness, this sudden, uncharacteristic anger, was unlike the Sarah I knew. The woman who had always been so open, so willing to discuss anything, was now building walls, retreating behind a veil of secrecy. The tension grew between us, an unspoken current of unease beneath the surface of our daily interactions. Eventually, the simmering resentment and my festering doubts boiled over. We had our first big argument, a shouting match that left us both shaken and raw. I expressed my concerns about the money, the unexplained withdrawals, the secrecy surrounding her monthly hospital visits, the unfamiliar medical bill. My voice, usually calm, was tinged with desperation and a growing sense of betrayal. "Sarah, I need to know what's going on. This isn't like us. Why are you hiding things?" She retaliated with accusations of her own. She accused me of being controlling, of being paranoid, of not trusting her after all these years. Her eyes flashed with an anger I had never seen directed at me. "My health is private, David. You have no right to question my choices or our money. You're making a big deal out of nothing." She painted me as the villain, the one who was destroying our perfect marriage with baseless suspicions. I was torn, utterly and completely. I loved her, more than words could express. But the doubt, now a gaping chasm, was eating at me, eroding the very foundation of our relationship. I felt like I was being lied to, manipulated. But the idea that my Sarah, my loving, honest Sarah, would betray me in such a fundamental way was almost unbearable. I felt guilty for even suspecting her, for allowing these dark thoughts to poison my mind. Yet the evidence, however circumstantial, was piling up, and I couldn't unsee it. The perfect picture of our life together was cracking, splintering into 1,000 tiny pieces, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I was standing on the precipice of a truth that would change everything. The conflict was no longer internal. It was now a tangible, painful wedge driven between us, threatening to shatter the decade of love and trust we had built. The argument, though painful, served its purpose. It solidified my resolve. I couldn't live with this gnawing uncertainty, this corrosive doubt that was slowly poisoning my love for Sarah. I needed answers, even if those answers shattered everything we had built. The risk of losing her, of destroying our marriage, felt terrifyingly real, but the alternative, living a lie, perpetually questioning the woman I loved, was far worse. I decided I had to find out the truth, no matter the cost. The next month, as the familiar time for Sarah's appointment approached, I braced myself. The day arrived, heavy with unspoken tension. Sarah went through her usual routine, a little more subdued than usual, perhaps sensing the shift in my demeanor. She left early in the morning, her usual vague goodbye hanging in the air. I waited, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, until her car was out of sight. Then, with a sickening lurch in my stomach, I got into my own car and followed. The act itself felt sordid, despicable. I, David, the trusting husband, was now a spy in my own life, tailing my wife like a common detective. Every mile felt like a betrayal, a transgression against the sacred bond of marriage. Guilt washed over me in waves, cold and relentless. But it was quickly superseded by a desperate need for clarity. I had to know. I deserved to know. I expected her to drive to one of the familiar Portland hospitals she sometimes mentioned, albeit vaguely. Instead, she took the highway south, driving for almost an hour, past familiar landmarks, past the city limits, until we were well into the agricultural landscape that borders Salem, Oregon. My stomach tightened further. This was not the usual routine. This was a new hospital, a new location, adding another layer of secrecy to an already opaque situation. The red flags, once mere suggestions, now unfurled like banners in a strong wind. She pulled into the parking lot of Salem Hospital, a sprawling medical complex I had never seen before. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. I watched her get out of her car, her shoulders hunched slightly, looking a bit nervous, a shadow of apprehension crossing her face. She smoothed her dress, took a deep breath, and disappeared through the main entrance. I found a discreet spot in the parking lot, positioning my car to have a clear view of the entrance. The hours that followed were an agonizing eternity. Each minute stretched into an hour, each hour into a lifetime. My mind raced, conjuring every possible scenario, every dark secret. Was she ill? Was it something serious she was hiding? Was she seeing someone else? The possibilities, each more terrifying than the last, swirled in a chaotic vortex of fear and anxiety. The sick feeling in my stomach intensified, a cold dread seeping into my bones. Finally, after what felt like an age, she reappeared. My breath hitched in my throat. She wasn't alone. Walking beside her, slowly, deliberately, was a young woman. Maybe 18 or 19 years old, impossibly frail, her skin pale, almost translucent. Her hair, a wispy brown, framed a face that held both a delicate beauty and an undeniable weariness. She was using a wheelchair, pushed by an attendant, but Sarah was walking beside her, her hand gently resting on the young woman's arm. Sarah was talking to her, her expression incredibly soft, a mixture of profound love and deep sadness etched onto her features. It was a look I rarely saw, a vulnerability that was both heartbreaking and utterly unfamiliar. They moved slowly towards a waiting car, a minivan with a handicap placard. As they drew closer, their voices became clearer, carrying on the gentle breeze. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat signaling an impending catastrophe. I strained to hear, every nerve ending tingling with a terrible anticipation. Then the words came, cutting through the quiet afternoon air like a knife, slicing through the last vestiges of my carefully constructed reality. Sarah leaned down, her voice choked with emotion. "I'll be back next month, sweetie. Stay strong for me." The young woman, her voice weak but clear, responded, "Okay, Mom. I love you." Mom, the single word echoed in my mind, reverberating with a chilling finality. Mom. Not Sarah. Not a friend. Mom. My world, the solid, predictable world I had inhabited for a decade, shattered into a million irreparable pieces. The air left my lungs in a whoosh, leaving me gasping, desperate for oxygen. The ground beneath me seemed to tilt, the parking lot spinning wildly. This young woman, fragile and clearly very ill, was Sarah's daughter. And I, her husband of 10 years, had absolutely no idea. A wave of nausea, so potent it threatened to overwhelm me, surged through my body. My vision blurred, the edges of the world darkening. My legs, suddenly devoid of strength, gave out beneath me. I stumbled, collapsing heavily against the side of my car, my head hitting the cool metal with a dull thud. My hands clutched at my chest, desperately trying to reignite the frantic rhythm of my heart, trying to breathe, trying to comprehend the incomprehensible. The sound of the minivan driving away, carrying Sarah and her secret, faded into the background. All I could hear was the roaring in my ears, the ragged gasps for air, and the deafening silence of a life utterly, irrevocably changed. My wife had a daughter she had kept hidden from me for our entire marriage. The betrayal was a physical blow, a punch to the gut that left me winded, broken, and utterly lost. My first emotion wasn't sorrow, Nor was it confusion. It was a searing, incandescent rage that flared through me, burning away the shock and the nausea. How could she? How could Sarah, my wife, the woman I had loved and trusted implicitly for over a decade, have kept such a monumental secret from me? 10 years of lies, 10 years of carefully constructed deception, a whole secret life lived parallel to ours, completely unbeknownst to me. I felt utterly betrayed, deeply humiliated, and like the biggest fool to ever walk the earth. A confrontation fantasy immediately began to play out in my mind, vivid and violent. I pictured myself storming into our home, screaming at her, demanding answers, my voice raw with the depth of her deceit. I imagined packing her bags, throwing her out onto the street, the image of her shocked face bringing a dark, fleeting satisfaction. The thought of her trying to explain, to rationalize her betrayal, only fueled the fire within me. There was no explanation, no excuse that could possibly justify such a profound lie. The drive home was a blur, a haze of white-hot anger and simmering resentment. My hands clenched the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles ached. Each mile that passed only intensified the feeling of being utterly duped, a pawn in her elaborate secret game. Every tender moment we had shared, every "I love you" she had ever whispered, now felt tainted, a cruel mockery of what I thought was real. Was any of it real? Did she ever truly love me? Or was I just a convenient cover for her hidden life? The questions swirled, acidic and corrosive, in the maelstrom of my fury. I felt like a stranger in my own skin, a man whose entire reality had been ripped away, leaving a gaping hollow void. The why question, though nascent, began to gnaw at me. Why did she hide this? Was she ashamed of having a daughter? Did she not trust me enough to confide in me? Did she genuinely believe I wouldn't accept her daughter? That I wouldn't stand by her, no matter what? The idea that she could believe so little in my love, in our bond, was a fresh wound, adding insult to injury. The thought that she had so little faith in my character, that she would think I'd abandon her over something so fundamental, was almost as painful as the betrayal itself. Then, the pieces about the money, which had been a vague concern before, clicked into place with a sickening thud. The unexplained withdrawals, the slow, steady drain on our savings, the financial strain I had dismissed as general living costs. It all made horrifying sense now. It wasn't for some vague health issue of hers. It was for this secret daughter, for her medical care, for her life. Sarah had been siphoning off our joint resources, the money we had worked for, saved, and planned our future with, to fund a life I knew nothing about. The financial betrayal was a bitter pill to swallow, adding another layer of deceit to the already towering edifice of lies. It wasn't just a secret. It was a financial burden she had unilaterally decided to impose on our shared future. I arrived home, the house eerily quiet, intensifying the ringing in my ears. I paced the living room, a caged animal, my mind racing, fueled by adrenaline and a desperate need for retribution. My eyes darted around, searching, gathering. I needed evidence, tangible proof to confront her with, to lay bare the extent of her deception. The old medical bill from Salem Hospital, which I had almost dismissed, now seemed like a smoking gun. I pulled up our bank statements on my laptop, highlighting every suspicious withdrawal, every unaccounted-for expense. I was preparing for battle, for a confrontation that would undoubtedly tear our lives apart. I felt an overwhelming need to get even for the decade of deceit, for the years I had lived in blissful ignorance while she orchestrated this elaborate charade. Justice, in its most primal form, was all I craved. But beneath the fiery anger, a cold, creeping fear began to set in, a chilling premonition of the unknown. What else didn't I know? If she could hide something of this magnitude, what other secrets lay buried beneath the surface of our life together? Who was this daughter's father? Was he still in the picture? What kind of life had Sarah truly been leading behind my back all these years? The implications were staggering, terrifying. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, was a stranger. And the fear of facing that stranger, of unearthing the full, ugly truth, began to mingle with my rage, creating a toxic cocktail of emotions that threatened to consume me whole. The decade of blissful ignorance had been shattered, replaced by a terrifying, boundless uncertainty. The front door opened, and Sarah stepped inside, looking tired, as she always did after her monthly appointments, but otherwise normal. She kicked off her shoes, dropped her purse on the hall table, and called out, "David, you're home early." Her voice was soft, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. She walked into the living room, her eyes widening slightly as she saw me standing there, rigid, flanked by the damning evidence I had meticulously laid out. My face must have been a mask of raw fury and pain, because her smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of apprehension. "David, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice tentative, almost a whisper. I didn't answer immediately. I just stared at her, letting the silence stretch, letting the weight of my discovery hang heavy in the air between us. My hands were still shaking, but a cold resolve had settled over me. This was it, the moment of truth. "Who is she, Sarah?" I managed to choke out, my voice hoarse, barely recognizable as my own. "Who is the girl at Salem Hospital?" Her eyes, usually so warm and full of life, instantly clouded with a mixture of fear and dawning realization. The blood drained from her face, leaving her as pale as the young woman I had seen earlier. She looked from me to the medical bill, then to the bank statements I had printed and circled, each entry a testament to her deception. She didn't deny it. She couldn't. Her shoulders slumped and her face crumpled, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before my eyes. A deep, heartbreaking sob tore from her throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated pain that resonated through the quiet house. "David," she began, her voice thick with tears, but no words followed, just more desperate, ragged sobs. She sank onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands, her body racked with an anguish I had never witnessed in her before. It was the sound of a decade of secrets finally breaking free. I stood over her, my initial rage still burning, but now mixed with a chilling sense of dread. The anger was still there, but it was starting to give way to a terrible, profound curiosity. I needed answers, not just a confession. "Tell me, Sarah, all of it, now." My voice was flat, devoid of emotion, a stark contrast to the maelstrom within me. Slowly, hesitantly, Sarah began to speak, her voice trembling, punctuated by gasps for air and fresh tears. The story that unfolded was one of immense sacrifice, heartbreaking choices, and a burden carried in agonizing solitude. She had gotten pregnant at 17, a scared, naive teenager, caught in a whirlwind of first love and devastating consequences. The father, a high school boyfriend, had abandoned her the moment he learned of the pregnancy, disappearing without a trace. Her own parents, strict and deeply religious, had disowned her, unable to reconcile her situation with their rigid beliefs. She was alone, a child facing motherhood, ostracized and terrified. Her daughter, Emily, was born with a severe, rare genetic condition. Sarah didn't know the full extent of it at first, only that Emily was constantly sick, requiring specialized care and frequent hospitalizations. The medical bills were astronomical, far beyond what a teenage mother with no support could ever hope to afford. She loved Emily fiercely, with every fiber of her being, but she quickly realized she couldn't provide the level of care her daughter desperately needed to merely survive, let alone thrive. It was an impossible choice, one that tore her soul apart. She made the agonizing decision to give Emily up for adoption, not out of a lack of love, but out of an overwhelming, selfless love that wanted Emily to have a chance at life. She found a wonderful family, the family I had seen at the hospital, who were willing and able to provide the constant medical attention Emily required. But Sarah made a promise, both to herself and to the adoptive family. She would stay involved, and she would help financially in any way she could. Her monthly visits, she explained, were to the hospital, where Emily received ongoing treatment, a complex regimen of therapies and medications. Sometimes she would visit Emily at the adoptive parents' home, spending precious hours with the daughter she loved but couldn't raise. Those moments were her lifeline, her secret source of strength and sorrow. The financial burden was crushing. She was paying for specialized treatments, medications, and often contributing to the adoptive family's general expenses, as Emily's condition was incredibly draining on their resources. Every extra shift she worked, every penny she saved, went towards ensuring Emily had the best possible chance. She had taken on extra freelance graphic design work, often late into the night, to cover the mounting costs, all while maintaining the facade of our shared life. Then came the hardest part of her confession, why she had hidden it from me. She was terrified, she admitted, her voice barely audible, terrified that I would leave her, ashamed of her past, of being a teenage mother, of the secret life she had been forced to construct. She didn't want to burden me with Emily's severe illness, with the immense financial strain, with the complicated, painful baggage of her past. She loved me so much, she said, that the thought of losing me was unbearable. She had felt trapped by her secret, caught between her unwavering devotion to Emily and her profound love for me. She had believed, mistakenly, that she had to choose, that she couldn't have both. As Sarah's raw, honest, and utterly devastating story unfolded, something shifted within me. My initial anger, so fierce and consuming, slowly began to morph. It didn't disappear entirely, but it receded, making way for a profound sense of shock, then an overwhelming sadness, and finally, a deep, aching empathy. I saw the immense, unbearable burden she had carried alone for so long, the solitary weight of a mother's love and sacrifice. I saw her selflessness, her unwavering devotion to her child, even when it meant tearing her own life apart to ensure Emily's survival. I saw the desperation, the fear that had driven her to such an elaborate, decade-long deception. I saw her, truly saw her, for the first time in years, perhaps ever. And I realized how utterly blind I had been, how completely oblivious to the silent suffering of the woman I claimed to know and love. This was the real moment I collapsed. Not from anger, not from betrayal, but from the sheer, crushing weight of understanding. I didn't fall physically, but my spirit buckled under the revelation. I collapsed, not because she had betrayed me, but because of the incredible suffering and sacrifice she had endured alone, and how utterly, tragically unaware I had been. The depth of her love for Emily, the depth of her fear of losing me, the impossible choices she had made. It all crashed down on me. I saw the true measure of her strength, the immense capacity for love that had driven her, and the terrible price she had paid for it. My heart ached, not just for her, but for Emily, for the years lost, for the secret lives we had both been forced to lead, albeit for very different reasons. The anger had been a shield, a protection against the vulnerability of true understanding. And now, the shield was gone, leaving me utterly exposed to the raw, painful truth. The days and weeks following Sarah's confession were a blur of raw emotion, exhaustion, and a painful, painstaking process of dismantling a decade of carefully constructed illusions. We talked for hours, sometimes through the night, our voices hoarse from crying, our eyes red and swollen. There were no easy answers, no quick fixes for the chasm that had opened between us. Each conversation unearthed new layers of pain, new facets of Sarah's sacrifice, and new dimensions of my own unwitting ignorance. It was incredibly hard, a brutal excavation of our shared history, demanding an honesty so profound it often felt unbearable. I had to come to terms with the fact that my wife had a secret daughter, a whole hidden life, and that I, her husband, had been completely oblivious to it all. The man who thought he knew everything about her, who prided himself on his empathy and understanding, had been living in a carefully curated bubble of half-truths and omissions. Forgiveness didn't come in a single, cathartic moment, but rather as a gradual, almost imperceptible shift within my heart. It wasn't about excusing the lie, for the deceit had been real and deeply wounding. Instead, it was about understanding the immense, impossible situation she had been trapped in. I saw her actions not as born of malice or desire to betray me, but as desperate acts of love and fear. Her love for Emily, a fierce primal instinct to protect and provide, had driven her to unimaginable lengths. Her fear of losing me, of disrupting the fragile peace she had built, had silenced her for years. I understood that she had been caught between two impossible loyalties, and in her desperation, she had chosen the path of secrecy, believing it was the only way to safeguard both her child and our marriage. The lie, while devastating, was a testament to her profound love and her immense, solitary burden. The next crucial step was meeting Emily. Sarah was hesitant, unsure how Emily would react to another stranger, especially one so intimately connected to her birth mother's secret life. But I insisted. I needed to see her, to understand the little girl who had shaped our lives so profoundly without my knowledge. When I finally met Emily, it was at the hospital, during one of her routine treatments. She was a brave, sweet girl, her small body frail but her eyes bright and surprisingly resilient. She was hooked up to various machines, her pale skin contrasting sharply with the vibrant colors of her hospital room. The adoptive parents, who had been informed of my existence and my new understanding, were incredibly gracious and welcoming, their own love for Emily radiating from them. They explained Emily's condition in more detail, patiently answering my questions, describing the daily challenges and the constant vigilance required. As I sat by Emily's bedside, holding her tiny hand, a strange sense of protectiveness washed over me. There was an immediate, undeniable connection, a recognition of the shared humanity, the shared pain, and the shared love that now bound us all. This wasn't just Sarah's daughter. She was a part of our life, a part of our story, and I felt an unexpected surge of love for this courageous child. Integrating Emily into our lives wasn't a seamless process, nor was it immediate. It was a slow, delicate dance, respecting the boundaries and routines of her adoptive family, while gradually weaving her into the fabric of our own. We started small, with visits to the hospital together, then occasional dinners with the adoptive parents, and eventually, weekend visits for Emily at our home. Once she was well enough, I began contributing openly to her medical expenses, no longer a secret burden, but a shared responsibility. The relief on Sarah's face was palpable, a weight lifted that I hadn't even fully comprehended before. The adoptive parents, initially cautious, became grateful and welcoming, seeing the genuine care and commitment I now brought to Emily's life. Our families, once disparate and disconnected by a monumental secret, began to intertwine, forming a new, complex, and unexpectedly beautiful tapestry. Life wasn't perfect, not by a long shot. The scars of the past remained, and the emotional recovery was an ongoing journey for both of us. But it was honest. The air between us, once thick with unspoken truths, was now clear, even if sometimes heavy with the memories of what had been hidden. David and Sarah were rebuilding their trust, brick by painstaking brick, stronger now, because they had faced such a huge challenge and chosen to confront it together. We learned to communicate with a depth and vulnerability we hadn't possessed before, understanding that true love meant accepting everything about a person, their past, their present, and even their most painful, carefully guarded secrets. This whole ordeal served as a brutal, yet ultimately transformative, lesson. I reflected on the importance of open communication, even when it's terrifyingly difficult. It's easy to shy away from uncomfortable truths, to let fear dictate silence. But the cost of that silence can be devastating. I also learned how easy it is to be blind to what's right in front of you, especially when you trust someone completely. My trust had been absolute, and in its totality, it had allowed me to overlook the subtle signs, to accept vague explanations, and to remain in a state of blissful, ignorant complacency. I realized that trust, while essential, must be accompanied by active engagement, by a willingness to truly see and hear the person you love, even when what they're saying, or not saying, is difficult. Our love story, I now understood, was messy, complicated, and far from the fairy tale I once believed it to be. It was etched with pain, marked by deceit, and forged in the crucible of a profound revelation. But ultimately, it was real. We were a family, now with Emily, and we were facing the future together. No more secrets. The monthly hospital visits continued, but now I was by Sarah's side, a supportive presence, a loving stepfather, fully aware and fully committed. The weight of the secret had been lifted, replaced by the shared responsibility and the profound love that now bound us all. We had navigated the darkest chapter of our lives, and though the journey was arduous, we emerged on the other side, battered but unbroken, ready to face whatever came next, together and in the light of truth.